Alrighty, so now we are live. I guess we don't have any more people showing up. We should make decision making really fast. Did we talk about this last time? Or was it?
No, we talked about the size, not the time.
Oh, I see.
So basically, when you make a request to a site, and for example, it issues a redirect. If it's got a body, we would still like to pool the connection, but we can't pool it until we've kind of consumed all of the response that the server is sending. So we want to drain it. We previously added a max drain size. So basically, how many bytes are we willing to consume before we decide to just chuck the connection? But then there's also the issue of, well, what if the server is being really slow or worse, malicious, and it's just not sending the remainder that it promised? How long do we want to wait before we chuck the connection? We actually have this implemented internally. It's just not exposed. So right now it's hard-coded to, I think, 2 or 3 seconds. And so the question is, do we want to expose the public knob for it? And if so, what should it be named?
Why wouldn't we call it like timeout or something?
We could call it timeout. We could call it like, response drain timeout or something. It's just a question of how do we want it to look kind of in IntelliSense, for example, next to max response drain size. Do we want them to be named similarly, or does that not matter?
No, I would make sure that they are share the same prefix so that they actually show up side by side. I think that makes the most sense.
But also, I wonder whether max makes sense for timeout. Timeout kind of implies max. The size, max totally makes sense.
Oh, I see.
But like for timeouts, we don't add, max timeout. Well, once you reach the time, you're out.
Right. So I think it would either be max response drain time or response drain timeout. It'd be one of those two. Or something so cool I don't even know about it.
Do we have the word drain in any other APIs other than this size? The similar concept exists on other types, and drain is used there as well, I believe. Like, I think that exists on web request handler or service point manager or HTTP web request or something. Someone could look. I was just curious. It's the first time I've seen the API with the drain. Maybe
I think Emo can use his fancy tool. Let's see, drain.
Probably not. All my brain.
Because we are trying to minimize the number of unique words that we use in.
No, I was just trying to understand if there's a better word for it or not. I don't know if there is.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Sync.
Yes.
It's a concept. I'm sure it makes sense.
What do you guys think about these names? Because I think it would be better because the problem is once you type max response, like the second one will no longer show up if you remove max from it, right? It only works when you would have a partial match, like you just type response or something.
All right. So then the question is, if we did that, there are other APIs on sockets HTTP handler that begin with max, like max redirect count and max whatever.
Yeah. This is getting uglier. So which one is it? It's the socket handler, HTTP handler, right? Okay, finally it's indexed. Yeah. I think I'm inclined to say Christoph loses the argument. I would just move max here. It's the fact that it's a bit weird.
Do any other Macs?
I'm okay with it. It just reads very strange, but
it does. But the problem is, look at the other APIs we have on it. So we have max automatic redirections, max connections per size, max response drain size. It would be very weird if one is like max at the end.
Well, we also.
I mean, we haven't shipped this yet. We could change those. However, those like max automatic redirections, max connections per server, and max response headers length are the same names that are used on HTTP client handler. So,
yeah, but these are they are maximums. But we have some other properties. Use cookies is not max use cookies. Just because we want them to be.
Maybe it should be. Make no sense, but you know.
Just like the timeout doesn't make sense.
There's no maximum cookies.
If you start, but if you IntelliSense will do also like a subnesting, subset string. So if you type dot response drain, you'll get both.
No, that one I agree. But the problem is, let's say you type max, right? Let's say you're in here and you invoke IntelliSense, right? At that point, you will, like, if you name this one like this, they basically lose all coherence, right?
Yeah, you won't. I don't like the term being max.
I would be fine with a response string timeout. I mean, there are other timeouts on here, like the pooled connection.
The collection of different timeouts, and they're also not
Pooled connection, idle timeout.
We have to, on the HTTP handler, receive data
people who
timeout.
are looking for timeouts are going to do dot timeout, and they're going to look and see the different timeouts you have.
Maybe that's fine. Maybe we just like
Overthinking a little bit.
Yeah.
And Christoph wins over, after all.
See.
Congratulations, Christoph.
There's the high order bit keeping.
This is a big day for you.
See, it's not even 11. You already have.
I would have won.
Oh fuck.
It's a new esport for you, Christoph.
Yeah, exactly.
Alright, so then that was easy. Alright, second one.
Okay, so this one, so client WebSocket exposes options, and at the moment they're relatively limited in what it exposes, and in particular around SSL it exposes very little configuration, and people have been asking for more, and in particular the one we've heard the most about is being able to configure certificate validation. This shows up a lot when you're using self-signed certs because they'll fail validation unless you're able to override it. So the proposal is basically to add the same API that exists on basically an HTTP client handler and elsewhere where there's a delegate that allows you to configure how certificate validation is done.
Does this add a new dependency, Stephen? Or is it dependency?
No, it already references System.Net security.
Okay, X5 Subline certificate session, yeah.
Yeah, it's already all there.
All right.
Yeah.
In fact, in fact, we already actually have this implemented. It's just not exposed publicly.
All right.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's literally the same signature as on SSL client authentication options, so I think that makes sense.
Yeah, we talked about, would it make sense to add an SSL options property here, and just, so we immediately get all of the SSL options? The problem with that is, one, whereas on Socket's HTTP handler, we're sort of explicitly tied an API, like this is built on Sockets, this is built on System.Net security. With client WebSocket, that effectively leaks an implementation detail.
Right.
And then also there are a couple properties that are already there. Like there's a client certificates property that's already on client WebSocket's options. So if we were to add SSL options, we would then sort of have two of them, which we could address by just having one redirect to the other. But it seems like given the API that already exists, it makes sense to just add the additional ones that we want directly.
Do you anticipate putting the other options that are on SSL options on here too then?
I think at some point we'll probably find that we want to. I don't know if, I'm not sure which ones are critical. This one is the one that's popped as being the most impactful. And certainly the more of the individual ones we add, if we end up adding the bag, we'll end up just having to redirect all of them into the bag.
Okay.
So there'll be some duplication, but yeah.
Yeah, I think in general, I think it's better to have them piecemeal and then to leak implementation, because it probably will hurt us eventually if we can't support things and have to throw over something. Alright, then we go with this one and say API approved on this one, get the other one out of the way. We didn't add anything. I was sure you would do that.
No. Look at the without milestone because Miguel didn't reply to my question.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
And then there was another one, right? What about this one here?
No, I don't
This
think
one is
so.
gone. Okay, so we
Yeah, that was the metadata.
that means we have one completely drained. So now it's literally just
The future.
just this one. So then we all get done in. Jesus, I don't know what to do. I'm out of a job now.
Oh, this one's going to be fun. Oh no, this is not as bad. Okay, this is only a subset of it.
Well, Miguel actually wants hierarchy.
Yeah, so that's the thing I talked with Miguel. Like he wrestled me down during MVP Summit and said, "I really want this. Ship it." In general, like the ignore all the strings here. I think I'm generally fine with supporting all those strings. It's just a matter of when we expose them. My bigger worry is that what I would like to avoid is that we have two different concepts. Like we have the OS platform here and we have the RIT thing in NuGet. And similar to we already have the TFM mismatch between what you can expose from the runtime information thing and there. Long term, I would like to get to the point where they agree on the strings, and you can basically the same questions you can get at compile time asked from using NuGet, you can answer at runtime, at least where it makes sense, right? Maybe it's a subset at runtime, or maybe it's a superset of runtime, but the things that are the same should be the same, right? So for example, the hierarchy that we expose here should be the same hierarchy you observe in the RIT graph. Otherwise, things don't make sense.
There's the whole intention of this before was not about having a hierarchy, but any given platform can basically pick arbitrary sets of them that they want to agree.
Exactly, but that's the problem, right? So it's effectively what you do is you pass them the platform and say, do you support this? Yes or no, right? Now, once you enumerate over all the platforms, and you can basically create a graph out of it, right? And so logically, there's a DAG behind that, and so the question is, does this DAG logically or physically agree with the RIT graph? Like what will be pretty shitty is that the RIT graph says this is compatible, and the runtime graph says no, or the other way around, right?
This is where I thought it was going to go before I saw the proposal, which is we have that other issue that's really controversial about how we detect what we're running on and stuff like that. So,
in the perfect world, is there any way we can literally just embed the RIT graph somehow? I mean, it makes no sense to embed the whole graph, but at least the one for the slides you're running on, right? So at least it agrees with it.
Changes over time. It's not fixed.
Yeah, it ships with the platform, so it's fine, right?
Yeah, shipped in the shared framework.
Yeah, so if it changes, well, you update it there, right?
It's certainly possible. We have the other library, the platform detection library that's been shipped sort of on the side. It's not in CoreFX. That's what'll give you your current running RIT. But it doesn't have the hierarchy. It doesn't know about the hierarchies and stuff like that right now.
Yeah, I haven't talked with Miguel in depth, but I don't think he's expecting them to be. We just lose Stephen again.
No, I'm here.
Okay, so somebody just did something. I see.
I was just saying I had a proposal for this scenario.
Oh, Derek, yeah. I was not sure. I think the way I understand Miguel proposing this is he expects, I think, to implement the API on his side, right? So don't think he thinks of this as an out-of-band release.
Yeah, so if we're just talking about adding constants,
For it to be useful, it has to start out of band, right?
runtime information is going to be out of band, or it's implemented in each platform.
Well, it depends on their side, right, Eric? I mean, my understanding is from Miguel's point of view, they ship their stuff always with the app, right? So they don't have much of a penalty for, just revving the platform. It's more for us where it's painful with full framework and other things where the out of band would be nicer. But my point is that because they expect them to ship in box, I think they wouldn't have a technological constraint of not being able to embed the RIT graph, right? Because they know it's the same thing, right?
Yeah, but that still doesn't mean that the RIT graph agrees across all our platforms. Core will have a RIT graph.
Agreed.
Xamarin will have a RIT graph. They're different. They vary.
Well, I mean, there's two sides, right? Have we enforcement in the product that it's the same, or do we even agree that it should be the same? I mean, when I talked to Miguel, he didn't seem to care at all about the RIT graph. But I think if you author NuGet packages and you use RITs, then I think you really want this thing to agree. Otherwise, it's very hard to reason about.
So right now, you can't even map all these to a RIT. I mean, TFM and a RIT. They don't. There's not a matching grid for these things.
Well, as long as they are perfectly overlapping. So I think there doesn't need to be one-to-one mapping. So for example, if one RIT corresponds perfectly to 3 of those, I think it's fine. What's not fine is if one read straddles two or more of these.
Oh, well, there's the Linux. Probably about half of these are going to fall back to the Linux grid, which is the generic grid, because they don't have a specific grid themselves.
Right. Yeah. Maybe I said it the other way. That's fine as long as they are basically one is a superset of the other. Then it's fine. Correct. Like if the spaces are divided always on the same boundaries versus like you cannot ever tell where you are. Because the read boundaries and the OS platform boundaries are not at the same place.
I agree. I just don't know how you can see. There's even the RID graph is
complicated.
Yeah. As far as what it really defines.
Yeah, I think my meta concern is that I really wish we could, get to the point where pound if and pound runtime checks are not completely different things where nothing makes sense, right? Because that's today's world. I don't know how to get there. I mean, I don't think the RID graph in NuGet is particularly approachable either. It has a whole bunch of other problems, but I don't know. I just don't feel like introducing yet another thing that we then later on regret and find that it's super hard to use, and then we have two different things.
But so what would be useful is if somebody put all of these in a table and basically said for each of these, what is the RID?
Right.
And are they like, are they matching? Meaning like there are no two RIDs in each of the columns.
The RID graph also encodes two other things that's missing from here. Architecture and version.
Right.
So you got to figure out how to map this, including versions and other pieces, to correct RIDs.
But they're basically just, the way I see it is if you look at the RID DAG, basically logically like the version numbers are subcomponents of that thing, right? Yeah. So like basically you would just map these to higher level nodes.
You could always map these unversioned ones to the unversioned RID nodes, yes. Yeah.
And then same with any CPU and those guys, right? They would all logically map to any CPU.
So another thing is, does Miguel want this casing?
Yeah, well, I was going to get into that once we actually
said yes. He told me that macOS is spelled with a lowercase m. Personally, I don't care enough one way or the other. I just find it very odd. I look at these names too. Yeah, I don't.
All the Mac ones are.
And branding is weird. I'd rather have consistent APIs than trying to chase the branding. Because macOS used to be called OS X, right? Those guys renamed that to this one.
macOS is now specific. It's the PC. You see the OS X comment even says OS X is basically all Apple.
All Apples are.
Is this your next step?
No, because it includes iOS, which is not next step.
And then I don't care enough.
So that's the hierarchy. So that's the hierarchy part that Miguel wanted. He wanted the same for NIX, right? Or Unix or whatever we call it. Linux and FreeBSD and other things.
Platform there.
This one, I think.
Offline, he talked about as well. He would like to add FreeBSD, which is not the Linux.
Yeah, he wants to handle the other distros too. Yes.
Yeah.
He said that.
Which are not Linux. So from that perspective, he wanted the hierarchy of you have a family of like the Mac OS or OS X, and underneath there's separate like TV OS, iOS, and other things. And the same for its Unix system, but it can be Linux or it can be FreeBSD or something else. Right. And even in Linux, it can be specific distro.
Yeah, so that would be kind of having an explicit DAG in the APIs, but I kind of don't know how to model it. It's kind of a.
Well, I wouldn't model the DAG in the API. What I would do is basically the API shape you have. You pass in a platform and it gives you true or false.
Yeah, the thing is that you don't know in which order to ask the questions.
Well, you have to.
You have to kind of read docs.
Well, you wouldn't have to, right? You just pick the one that you care about.
Well, but maybe you care about,
discovery or.
So first or three in a group, you could ask the high-level question: are you even Apple platform? If not, then you definitely not one of those three.
Right. I think the API fails if that is not intuitive. That's why I don't think it's necessary to model the DAG. Like you should be able to look at those things and kind of know that if I'm asking for whether you run on a Unix style operating system, it should be like obviously everything that is Linux related should answer yes for that as well, right? Like I mean, like that's what I'm saying. I think that there's an explicit graph I think we should look at and then say like, does this back make sense? Like, do these answers are they
correct? Basically,
is it correct, and also does it make sense?
But you as a caller, you're not gonna dynamically explore the graph just from the API. You know it ahead of time, and you know what you want to ask. You want to ask, am I running on Linux, or am I running on Unix? Am I running on iOS versus OS X?
Yeah, it was not. My thing was not about dynamically exploring the graph. It's about the graph being obvious in the APIs. So today the graph is not obvious. You have to read the docs to know what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I think the general guideline is you would not probably ask 3 things, but you would just ask the most specific question that you care about.
Well, but what if your program can deal with 3 specific things?
Well, then that would be not in the same hierarchy usually.
What if they are?
Well, then you have to know, because it depends on what differentiation you have to make.
Yeah, exactly. So the scenario is not that I'm claiming. I mean, I think the solution to this problem is harder than the trouble from reading docs. But imagine that you're writing a reusable library and you can handle all of these scenarios.
Unlikely, but yeah.
Or like a large subset.
Yes.
If you know the graph, you can much more cleanly and efficiently ask the questions.
No, my point is, let's say, like, it depends on what decision you're going to make, right? Let's say you want to p-invoke API A versus API B, right? In that case, it's on you to figure, and there's nothing to do with those docs. Basically, you have to know which OS ships API A versus API B, right? And then you just have to guard the call correctly, right? And so you wouldn't care whether there's a family for PlayStations because, the API ships in PlayStation Vita and it ships in PlayStation 4, so that's what I'm checking for, right? You can only check for what you know. You cannot, and then the rest is just, you give up. Like, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think the family makes sense for things like, when I render a path on screen, should I use slashes or backslashes, right? And let's say, okay, we don't have path dot separator, right? You would say, well, if it's a Unix style operating system, I use a slash, otherwise I use a backslash. And if it's a Mac-related thing, I'm using a colon instead of a backslash, right?
You can imagine that you have as well, like, hey, for iOS has some specific API which is fast, and there's generic Unix API which is extremely slow. So I'm gonna fall back if I'm not on iOS or whatever, right?
And I think the problem there is that the particular decisions you're going to make have nothing to do with the grid graph. It has to do with what decision are you going to make, which API are you going to call, and so you have to consult those docs to see what things you need to check for, right?
You have to know basically the hierarchy in your mind, yeah.
So, okay, so things like path separator, would you say, are you Mac OS, continue, or would you say, I'm Mac OS X or Unix, continue? Right? Because you could call them to the node and say, are you Mac OS? And it will return 20, okay, great. I thought it was Mac OS, so I'm just going to use that. But you could sufficiently handle OS and Unix as a condition.
Right.
High level node. Which question do you ask?
Well, that depends on the thing. So, for example, Mac OS, they usually render paths not with slashes, but with semicolon, with colons for some reason, right? So you would have to say, well, Mac OS is Unix operating system, but I handle it separately because I want to render it separately. Right? And then again, that is domain knowledge that you just have to have. Like, there's like we can't help you with the block you put under the if check because it's completely depending on what you're doing. But what we can help you with is given those strings, do you know which one to pick, right?
So when would you choose the high level grouping, like OS X or Unix, rather than the specific nodes? And what scenario would you choose a high level?
I would say that in general, when it's a property of Unix rather than, so for example, that any Unix supports some version of POSIX, right? And let's say there's a super common POSIX API you want to call, right? And they don't. I mean, the problem with Unix is they don't generally agree on APIs, right? But let's say there's a POSIX API that everybody has to implement and support it everywhere. The API is stable, whatever. Then you just ask for that for your p-invoke, something like that.
Why there's only one Windows platform there?
Because it's only Windows 10 now. Did you get the memo?
Really?
It should be controlled by version if you cared about the others.
Yeah. I think those should be not version, right? Version should not be a thing here. Otherwise, this thing will explode very badly.
Yeah. Switch is Nintendo Switch?
Sorry?
Switch? Is that Nintendo Switch?
Probably.
Yeah, maybe we should read that.
Yeah, we should put, well, yeah.
So that's a very
we preview everything that comes from Apple with Apple then?
But those are specific like names, right? Switch is a very generic name.
Well, it is. Well, they're all like product names, right? Whatever the, you know. I mean, Windows is a very generic one too, right?
That's true.
There's no door entry. You only have Windows. But yeah. That's the other problem I have with this is because it's all marketing that might get obsolete, right? For example, Mac OS and OS X, right? Like, I don't know how else you would do it. Like, there's no.
What about Xbox One X?
Xbone X? Yeah, I don't know.
XOX.
About the PlayStation, like are there different platforms really? PlayStation 4 versus Portable 2 versus Vita?
Really?
Well, that's something I would like to poke at Miguel a little bit to
So
explain.
that's why I agree with Christoph. I think we need to like basically map these, right, and then understand what the relationship is, or what the entire relationship is. Like looking at these three strings, I don't know whether one is a superset of the other, right? Like you just, like unless you were in PlayStation, you wouldn't know. And maybe that's okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that might be fine.
But
We do need to have some sort of idea what they map to. What does it imply if I'm running on this platform or this string?
Also, we said Windows doesn't have versions, but PlayStation has.
Yeah, we were talking about we shouldn't probably have the versions here.
Maybe the version should be removed, and Miguel might have some arguments why it should be there.
Well, the next question will be, okay, so now how do I tell the version? How do I discover the version?
Yeah, that's a whole other question. Yeah, that's a challenge. We have numerous issues.
Whereas you have lots of experience designing APIs like this. I think you're the best person.
This one is a...
It's fun. It's fun to design these
you say that.
APIs. And
Question from the community: UWP, is it an OS platform or not, or is it Windows?
Yes. I would think iOS. Sorry, I would treat UWP different from Windows.
Because different API set.
Well, because they're effectively like it's similar to imagine you run iOS apps on macOS, right? They're basically running in a different environment, right? They're not the same thing.
one is universal, the other one is not.
And the universal one is a subset of the other, ironically.
We'll go too deep.
Well, that's what universal usually is. It's the lowest common denominator, correct? Makes total sense.
So I have a feeling that we're not gonna be able to close on the exact hierarchy for two.
No, like I mean, my goal here was also not to review the API. It was mostly like getting a list of things we, I think, need to follow up. I don't think it's complete enough.
There's more details than needed, but one of the other things I think is Miguel is assuming here is that those are going to become part of .NET Standard, which they won't become part of a .NET Standard version until we have another version.
Remind me again, what happened to Random Information? We shipped it as part of .NET Standard, right? That's not in it. Okay, so that means
these public APIs have to be .NET Core only, or they can add them to Xamarin only too. But.
So you're saying that by the time it's in .NET Standard, all these platforms will be obsolete?
Yes.
We won't need those APIs.
Big substitutes.
The quintessential chicken and egg problem.
Yeah, you really need them for .NET Standard libraries, but you can't have them for .NET Standard.
question was about the UWP and like different platforms it runs on. That might be actually interesting because UWP is present as well on Xbox. So if we have Windows, we have Xbox, yet UWP can be on both of them.
Yeah. So this is
what the API allows you to
That's the done. Mm-hmm.
You basically say.
So would you return true for, if you're running on UWP Windows, would you return true for Windows as well?
So if you're running on a Windows platform and you're running inside of an app container and you ask, are you UWP, the answer is yes.
And if you ask, am I Windows?
No,
if you ask, am I Windows?
Yeah, it's also true. So in which case you would basically say, well, Windows would be the superclass of both of them, and then maybe there's a different entry for, I don't know, Win32 or whatever, Centennial, whatever you want to call this, like the fully trusted access everything kind of mode, right?
Then it's very hard to make any judgment call about which is which then. Because I would expect Windows to be, Windows 10, I can access all the invoke all the APIs. UWP, no, not so much.
Yeah.
So there's similar confusion between what this.
Well, but that's what I said. Like, I mean, that's the thing we need to figure out what the sensible hierarchy is and whether it's intuitive, right? I think from a customer standpoint, it makes sense to say Windows is the implied superset because I don't know how to call the thing that unifies UWP and Windows.
The primary purpose of these APIs is, can I p-invoke into this OS? Are these OS APIs present?
Yes.
So in that sense, I wouldn't think UWP and Windows should be returning true at the same time.
Probably not. That's what I'm meaning.
Okay, but how would you then? Well, it depends, right? Like, I mean, well, fundamentally, like, there's no superset subject relationship that makes sense between Win32 and UWP.
Sorry.
Right, but there is a common subset that both share.
Yeah.
And option number one is you don't expose it, so you're either Windows or UWP, but you never do both. Or we say, well, there is a combination that we model. I don't know what the RIT graph does today. I think the RIT graph today, I believe, and Eric can be correct, but I think Win is basically everything.
Yes.
And then there's a different.
We also today there's sort of an implicit assumption that if you're not Windows, you're Unix. If we were to make Windows return false, but not on a Unix system, that might start causing problems.
Yep. This is why this is a mess. This whole set of stuff is messy.
But as I say, you have so many experiences now. You can design perfect API for it.
Yeah. UWP on HoloLens versus UWP on Xbox. Windows 10 S.
There are way too many different constraints and scenarios to cover. That's why it's really
yeah.
Why did you add the smiley face at the end?
I have edit permissions. I'll delete it. So.
So I think the problem is, I talked with Miguel briefly. Like, you pointed out one thing which I buy is, like, let's not have perfect be the enemy of the good here. Let's try to model more of the platform so you can write sensible checks without having to solve world hunger. But I do think we should think about what the experience is, and then have a separate discussion of like when we ship what, because I think it is a mess right now, and like if you try to do runtime light up, it's virtually impossible without doing some crazy stuff.
So what happens in terms of being obsolete or marketing things like name change?
I would not. I would just say if the marketing department of some company decides that fuck it, Switch is now called FooBar, and like, tough luck, you decided to rename it. Like,
well, also it could mean that probably if they release a new Switch and they rename it, it's gonna be a different platform. So we're gonna add a new constant. Switch will mean the Switch from 2018.
Well, this is why there's something called PlayStation 4. It's a completely different platform than PlayStation or PlayStation 3. It's not really a revision. It's a new platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think that's probably fair. In which case, version numbers would be okay if it's
for this.
It's a
brand new platform.
It's a reset, yeah.
And this is very much what's happening now. And what will happen to this list 3 years, 4 years from now? It'll look like a
You just add, yeah.
Really weird. Like you were saying, Switch and Switch 2 and Switch is some order.
Well, but I don't know. The whole point of this type is to ask the question what you're running on, right? This table will always be a history book in a certain sense, right? Like, I don't think that's necessarily the problem.
So where are those constants?
What do you mean, where are they?
Are they members on some type?
Yeah, member on OS platform, yeah.
And does OS platform have any other members?
Well, it's basically a struct that is a glorified enum, right?
Okay, so it doesn't
It's just a
have
wrapper
other
on a
members.
string.
What has like operator equals and
Sure, but not like.
So
So
there's no.
that's fine. I mean, piling new members in a type that also has some other APIs, that would be kind of bad.
Yeah, that's true. No, we designed OS platform deliberately to do that.
Yeah, we designed it such that you can not have to have a constant. You can pass in a string. Yeah. So like the dynamic lookups.
I remember the design.
Then why are you asking the question?
He's testing you, if you remember.
You can't claim you don't know it and then claim you do know it.
Okay, I was talking about two different things. I remember the design activity. I didn't. Not the design result.
So then let's leave that as is.
I'm marking it future.
Good call. I forgot about that. That we should do. So now we have 20 minutes left. That's.
But we should move it back to API and its work, right?
Yeah, I want to make it clear though that we don't push it back to Miguel and say, come back with a better proposal, because some of the stuff is thinking that we have to do, right? Not just Miguel. Right?
Well, let's assign it to someone then.
That's true, but yeah, I just want to avoid the middle finger going back. So the one thing thanks to my amazing telemetry forces, Aston yesterday rolled up something that you want.
Telemetry or telepathy?
Yeah, same thing really. Like,
same thing.
I sent him telemetry, which helped him to come up with this list here. Which, this is useless, I have to say. How do you collapse this? The answer is you don't.
Copy and paste into Notepad.
Sublime text, come on.
Exactly, don't be legacy, man.
Notepad is fast.
So Sublime. Alright, so Stephen brought up this point that we added a bunch of APIs piecemeal to support, span of T and friend, and we approved them all in isolation, but we have never really looked at the whole list. And thankfully, Aslan already did a pass of, what looks odd, and is that everything you just happened to find, or do you think that is the final list?
Everything for system memory, but this would spark conversation around how span is used in other APIs, because this is obviously what we do here in the APIs.
Yeah, I think Stephen was also talking about like all the other overloads that he added like outside of system memory. But you basically just scan system.memory later, right?
And also in the other overloads, so I didn't do like a pass through all the APIs, but I've been looking at the PRs, and they usually would opt into being consistent with the existing APIs. Like all the new overloads across the framework, I mean, they are just overloads. There's already an overload that takes an array, and like I know Steve was doing a lot of this work, and he just chose to be consistent with the method that already existed on this type, which I think is the right choice.
It's like RSA.
To be fair, there were a few cases where I didn't, and I probably should have, like with Stream rather, read and write async. We had talked about making them source and destination, so that's what they are currently, but the existing overloads just use buffer. And so like that's one of those things, should we go back and rename all those parameters to just be buffer?
Are both of them buffer? You said source and destination, what are they named?
Well, when you read, the parameter is called destination. When you write, it's called source.
Then let's do this. Let's just walk through this. You probably will not be able to finish. And given that Christopher, I need to run at 11. We probably have to set up another, probably 2-hour pass over the actual diff to actually catch the other additions we made. But we should probably finish this one first because that's.
Do you think it's worth it? I know we want to focus on span, but do you think it's worth just to pass over the entire 2.1 versus 2.0 diff of .NET Core?
Yeah, we should do that, but I just don't want to do it in the next 15 minutes because then.
The same for that
Hard
2-hour
stop at 11 or
yeah.
Not just the span APIs, but the entire diff between 2.0 and 2.1.
Yeah, I would finish this one first, and then I would do the remaining diff. I think we should go with the whole thing, wholesale.
So here I already see one thing. Like for example, as bytes, the parameter is called source. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think the source destination terminology only makes sense if you have two.
I think source is a typical problem of extension methods because that word link uses everywhere, and people thought that's the official name for the thing you're extending, which is, I don't think, the intent.
So
everywhere we use span.
So span, if we cannot come up with a better name, I think span is okay. Span is a bit like, well, we couldn't come up with a name, so
S.
So maybe it's okay.
I mean, quite frankly, what else do you need? I mean, like value, span, like they all. I mean, if you only have one, like there's not really a point in it.
Maybe it's okay.
So for one, we have like for index of any last representing those sort of things. We take in a previously span values, but the string ones have any of char array.
What?
Like the string and 6 APIs, they name their argument any of. Like
You're saying
instead of values.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the reason is because the string APIs are kind of, based on existing APIs.
Like in our APIs, we have value in all places, like index of value, and then this one makes sense to have values because I don't know what. I don't know how it is now.
Well, any of makes it, frankly, more explicit.
Yes.
Because index of values may mean all these values in the exact sequence or any of the values.
Of any in the name,
Yeah.
right?
I see. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So, is it fair to say then, let's rename it to match the other API?
Any of? I'm not completely confused because Asan just had a good point. Like any is already part of the method name.
Sure. Like ignoring that, like do we care about consistency? Because I mean, this API here is literally on string forever, right? I mean.
The other thing is like other API that index of taking value, and then index of any becomes any of. So in span we have value, values.
Yeah, renaming this one to any of would have other ripple effect that would become not consistent with other things.
So it's effectively an unwinning battle. Okay. All right, then let's leave it as is.
But I would rename. So one thing, let's rename the like there was source somewhere, correct? Yeah.
Let's just walk the thing.
Okay. Yeah. You want one by one? Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, like I hope we're not remember the decision. So okay. So this one we said we leave as is. What about this one here?
Rename source to span.
I think that works.
Yeah. The third one. Yeah. This one is. I'm on the fence.
Why not source destination?
Okay, there's no source. Oh, you mean rename array to source? Sure.
Why not? Seems.
I mean, that's not really even visible to the user. And we have array, we have span, I think. So you have overloads like that. So we follow the source. I mean, it could work. My main concern was with the destination argument. Like in most places we use destination for copy to, but like things like array copy, we have destination array. So I prefer destination because that's consistent with a lot of the other copy to APIs.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, unless on a given API, when you only have one type, unless you have overloads, or even if you have overloads, I wouldn't care. I would just say, the type is already telling you what you're putting it into. I would just designate the role, not the type. It seems very weird to repeat the type name.
Yeah,
But I would still probably call array source because if you invoke it as an extension method, well, you see the parameter. If you invoke it as an instance method, then you don't. But then it also doesn't hurt to rename it, right?
okay.
Sure.
That's good. You don't have any other extension methods like this, right? A lot of them are just instance methods.
Sorry, what was the question?
Do we have other copy to methods that are methods?
I don't think we have that many. Most of them should be instance. I think most of them come from the I collection.
Yeah, most of them do that. Mutable list has one that's copy to, but this is an array. It takes only one parameter for its array.
So what is the extension name?
It's copy to and it has one parameter, which is the array. It doesn't have a destination per se. It didn't call it destination, it just called it an array.
For be internally consistent with this. Yeah. We also use just index without start.
Yeah.
Which is also weird.
Use that.
I think array has like almost all the static helpers in array. I think just do with the index unless. I'm pretty sure. I may be wrong, because I keep confusing them.
So stream read and writes have offset and count. That's as their names.
Yeah, like so does array segment. I think it uses offset and count.
Yeah, but you're creating a memory which has a property called length.
Yeah. So that's why I stuck to places where we have index and length or start and length, and they all use start index.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just browsing array, it looks like almost everything is called start index or source index for the copy, where you have the source index and the destination index.
Yeah, I think this one is fine. On the other hand, the next one, how did we
do you want to keep it started or do you want to remit start index?
start and what?
Do you want to keep it start or do you want to say start index? Because that's what we use.
Oh. I don't care about this one. You guys, either of them is fine, but I worry that we have start in many places.
All
right?
array has start length. I'm saying on mass change to start index.
Yeah.
Well, array. Array segment, like you said, has offsets. List of T has offset and count as well. Or sorry, it has index and count.
Array and string.
But array is different. Yeah.
I would hold at a higher.
Yeah. I'm just trying to look at other precedents where we have both. There's not a consistency.
My concern would be more once we add range, we may find ourselves having overloads, and then it would be kind of nice if that would align with what the range thing looks like. And I think on range we will probably call it both start and index.
List of T has a get range method and it has index and count.
Yeah.
It's fine. Let's move on. It's I would fix things that are like really bad at this point. We are polishing the rock. Number 5, on the other hand, is really bad. Span and value. Well, they are both values and they are both spans. They should. It probably should be called either first and second or left and right.
Unless you use AB.
Yeah, we should not use AB.
Except we have like primitive types, they use value.
To be fair, the naming convention on primitive types is usually pretty fucked. Like, especially on string. I'm surprised they spent 4 characters on it, because some of them are literally just S. Second. I mean, I can go left, right, I can go first, second, I can go...
If we expect the majority usage of this, though, to be as if it was an instance method, it's a little strange to, like, say, something dot compare to, and then the only argument is called second or right.
Oh, yeah. That's actually a good point.
I think for equals, you probably call the argument you're passing other most of the time.
Yeah, but not for equality. Like, we have not double equals. We have first, second, left, right.
No, because those are operators, so you never call them as methods.
We should have a convention and call the first parameter this.
So we have rhetoric.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this could ever break.
We just would need to use the escape ampersand symbol.
Sure.
Not ampersand, the whatever.
At. Yeah, I mean that would work, but
like data row compared equals use left, right? That's a method.
And maybe people will be like, what the heck? It's called me.
So sequence equal has basically this problem that Steve mentioned.
Yeah.
You basically call full sequence equals second.
So
Where's?
I'm looking at other examples right now. I'm looking at string compare, for example, where this has string A and string B. Yeah. I haven't found it.
5 minutes.
The meeting is over in 5 minutes, by the way.
That's fine. First, second seems fine.
I really think it really does depend on how we expect people to use it. If we expect them to use it as an extension method only, there's one pattern that works better. If we expect them to be using it as a static method.
What if extension method 95% of the time? or 99?
Honestly, I think we should choose the one that matches that thing.
Source and other.
Source. Source implies copy, or some
Yes.
like transformation. This is just a comparison. There is no source.
Original and other.
Don't we already have APIs like this
Yeah,
somewhere?
when we do the other, that's the equals. I think we do a lot.
For
Yeah,
equals,
that's
yes,
other, yeah.
But for string,
Yeah.
yes, parent mentioned the.
So I think that we should choose either between first and second or left and right. Or stick with span and value. Those are the only choices, because other ones, I don't think they have benefits. They are just new words that you invent, but they have exactly same trade-offs. So span and value works kind of best if you treat it as an instance method. Correct? Because you only see value compared to value.
Compared to
Well,
value is
actually, no. Actually, I would, on the, like instance APIs, call this other thing other. So like equal has, it calls it other.
but all the compared to methods call value. Today, the instance compared to methods call value.
Like int
Yeah.
compared to.
Char compared to calls a value, right? Yeah.
Well, as
All the
Imo,
ones I've seen before,
as Imo said, don't look at the primitive types. But
those are the ones I have compared to.
Either a string or a primitive type.
all right, so we have the following choice.
Here's my official definition. Other.
That's the equals method. That's not compared to.
Doesn't matter. You're comparing to something else. It's other.
That's I quality comparative.
It takes two instances. So
X and Y.
there's
Okay.
there's no like this and other.
Yeah.
All right, those are the, I think, reasonable choices.
I go with a third, and I propose we use original, source, or span on the left-hand side. Works for me.
And other.
Whatever. It's a puzzle. Wes, you like puzzles. You should think about it offline. Because you see, this piece doesn't fit if we name it this.
Can I cheat and color some of the
What?
existing pieces?
I have a different meeting. I don't know where it is. You want me to tell you where your meeting is?
Yeah, because I don't have it on my calendar.
Fine.
You added me to the thread, but I don't actually have the meeting in my
252501.
2501.
I'm pretty sure it's
I know it.
the frosted glass room.
The frosted glass room. Okay, so we have one more before I have to run. Sequence equal. First, second. Span and other, man.
Exactly.
Alright, easy. So that's 5. Okay, we can do one more.
Oh, it's just one more.
Copy 2.
Wait, number 7 has no.
Some 7 as memory.
That's fine. That one is segment. If it's a rect segment, it's called segment.
So there, it's a memory, it's a memory segment.
Nah, don't encode the type again.
Okay.
Try get array segment. Correct?
So we call it what? Memory and segment?
Sure.
Shouldn't be read-only.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this one we have try get buffer, but it takes it a buffer. Or it's array segment, but takes it a buffer.
Sorry,
But that's because of the byte part, I think.
did you consider a trig array overload that takes memory of T as opposed to read-only memory of T in addition? Or you just relied on implicit conversions? Okay. Because it's not an extension. Got it.
Okay. Alright, copy 2. What did you say?
Sequence destination should be source destination.
Well, except it's a this parameter, but maybe fine.
I think that's what we said earlier. Source and destination we already had, I think. That was, I believe,
The source and destination kind of works for both
Alright.
scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did the same here. Okay, 10, and then I have to run.
So we use source here. It's not source destination there.
Right, buffer writer.
Right value.
Yeah, I agree.
Not right. Writer value.
Why? Piece it in my head. and value. All right. Sweet. So if we have another 2-hour pass over that, does this have to happen this week, or is this something we can do next week?
The sooner the better.
I'm pretty sure it's. So this is parameter names. It's totally not breaking. So I think we can like.
Oh, it is breaking actually.
Nah.
Technically from preview,
Yes.
but
Less likely to break people, but yes.
we're 2 weeks in the API freeze already for 2.1, so
The DCR and everything, and hand waving. Like I can set up probably something 2 hours this week if I get a room. Like that's usually the bigger problem.
The like whole pass of all changes of APIs. That one is a bit more scary.
That's what I'm saying. This one is like, given the speed we just had, I think there's only 9 more items we should be able to be done in like hopefully half an hour, which gives us 1.5 hours to actually do the scary thing.
Yeah. This one we should be done in 5 minutes. Now that we established that pattern.
Well, we're going to find something that doesn't fit the pattern.
All right.
take like a photo of that or something.
This guy's online, and I'll see you later.